Take it.
There are a lot of people who won't return books, aren't there?
Mm.
Or take a long time. So yeah, I read Orwell's Coming Up for Air this month.
Yay!
This book is one that you really love, um, or at least really like. I don't know how much you really love it. It's
I
not
like it.
1984. It's very different, but I definitely see a lot of you in this book, and I see why
Yes.
you enjoy it so much.
And you
Um,
even mentioned to me that you could see I'd been influenced by it when I wrote my own short story.
yeah, I was what 30 pages in, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is very similar. It's nothing happens. You were right
Ah.
about that. Um, so I got 30 pages in, told you like, okay, finish part one. This would be nice to see like what happens, and you're like, I don't think anything really happens. And you were correct.
Yeah.
Now, how do I set up this book to give it its fighting chance? Basically, I would say, have you seen the movie The Sandlot?
Mm. No.
No. It's one of those coming of age stories. Basically, this boy or this I forget how it starts. I think it's this man telling his talking about his childhood
Mm.
and how he grew up like playing baseball with his friends on the sandlot and telling scary stories, eating s'mores in their like tree house, and it's just kids being kids enjoying this one beautiful summer.
Mm.
Um, that's the closest I can compare this book to. It's basically this guy who has a kind of mediocre life, mediocre marriage. He's just not really doing much. He
Yeah,
he remembers
basically.
having some good times as a kid, where he would go out and fish a little bit and just, you know, be a kid, really.
Yeah.
There's not much else to it. So if you want something that kind of reads like an autobiography, it's kind of like that. It's also just someone who's, I can see why people would enjoy reading this book. Um, he he has a bit of a sad realization about like, well, the town's changed that he grew up in. He goes to war, he gets married and comes back. In the very end of the book, he comes back
Mm.
to his old town and sees like pretty much everything has changed. But
I find
I
that
would
sad.
say it's sad to an extent, but then you think about it and realize no, it's actually way it's definitely for the better that it's changed
Mm.
because the previous town was already dying out. His father's store was losing money, and he was just glad that his father and mother died before having to go into like the workhouse.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's a bit sad. But then he comes back and realizes, well, there's a factory here, and all these new people have come to this place, and he doesn't like it because it's not the same as what he remembers, but it has kept the town alive. I think without that, then the church would be closed, his parents' graves would be gone.
Yeah. But I empathize
And
with him because he's so sad.
yeah,
And all he thinks about is if I go back to where I used to be happy, it'll be like it used to be. And he goes there and it's not. And he's so
but
sad.
I feel like he spends the middle part of the book saying, like, yeah, I know it won't be that way though. And he even says at the very end, like, I knew it wasn't going to be. I can't tell you my train
Mm.
of thoughts, but I knew it wasn't going to be the same.
And no one knows
And
him. He's like the
yeah,
prodigal son returning to the town, and they're just like, who the hell are you?
yeah, he returns after what, 20 years, something like that, 20, 30 years. He's 45 at this time at the very end. And yeah, he even sees someone that he knew growing up, or two people he knew growing up. And yeah, they don't remember him at all. Uh, it honestly, his marriage is the most depressing part for
Yeah.
me because his wife is just super worried about money, and that's all she cares about, which is really annoying. And he has to even lie to her just to go back to his old town. He has some spare change that he, well, actually, at the time, it's a lot of money, but that he uses for this trip because she wouldn't just believe him if he's going there. She thinks he's going to be with like another woman, or
Yeah.
even then, it's like, well, why can't we use that money for butter? And all right.
That makes sense to a point if if they're struggling for resources and he wants to blow it all on a trip. Like I think he needs
Yeah,
this for his mental health, but also yeah, like they need to eat and pay their rent, you know?
but they've also made it pretty clear, like they're not doing poorly. They're making as much
Hmm.
money as anyone else on that
I think
street.
but you could look out today and say that in working class areas, like, oh, you're making as much money as everyone else, but every single person in that house in all those houses is struggling, you know? And
Mm,
I kind of
I
felt like they were all struggling. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm trying to remember from like a year ago. We
Yeah,
just read it.
I never got that feeling that they were struggling. Um, he works as an insurance broker making, what is it, or £7? Yeah,
Hmm.
£7 a week.
Okay.
Um,
Insurance broker should be a good
so,
job, you'd think. Yeah.
or maybe not exactly a broker, but working with insurance.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah, it's not a lot of money necessarily. It's enough to get by, and
Hmm.
yeah, he's happy enough with it. It's better than when he was like a door-to-door salesman. But is it enough for a family with two kids? Who's to say?
What do you feel about the title of the book and when it actually comes up? Because I directly mentioned it in my story. It really affected me when I read it.
Yeah. So coming up for air is the second to last chapter in the book. He feels like, yeah, he's coming up for air, but then there's like no air to breathe. He's gotten lost in the system in a way. Like the world's moved on, but he really hasn't. But he hasn't really had much to move on to. So yeah, it's impactful to an extent, but I can't say like it meant as much to me
Okay.
because I'm like, well, you really don't have much to look forward to except for the past. It's
Yeah, his whole life is nostalgia. He does nothing in the present or the future.
yeah, and that's the saddest part. It's kind of like the millennial problem that
Yeah.
you have a lot of the time. Um, so while yeah, it's a bit sad, I can't really empathize with him as much because it's like I don't have those types of issues. Uh,
Sure. This book is very
or
much for
issues with the
me,
world.
I feel like.
It really is for you. I see that through and through. And if you hadn't read it, I would have recommended it to you and said, this is the book that's going to change your life, something
Yeah.
like that. But can I recommend this to a normal person? Honestly, I was bored through a lot of it. I'm just like, all right,
Really.
he's talking about fishing again.
Hmm.
Like,
I get it.
come
Yeah.
on. Um, so I'm really on the edge about it because it's like I see why people would enjoy it because it's someone that you feel for. You feel for this guy throughout the whole book, but nothing really happens. There really is no conflict. But I
The
got through
conflict is
it well
with the
enough.
world, I feel like.
Yeah, but the world's not doing anything wrong. He's just refusing to like move on. Now, he did like fight in the war and just led a pretty vague life through that. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of Catch 22, where he's just
Hmm.
has a job that has no meaning.
Yeah.
And well, another
Who
connection
would
to you in
want?
that case.
Yeah, such like that. But yeah, do you think he's a good guy?
I think he's nothing in a
He's
way.
nothing. Yeah.
He's just kind of like a leaf going down the stream. He didn't have much growing up, maybe, but he didn't really have much that he wanted to do. He
Mm.
doesn't have, I feel like even the Dreamer and the Dostoevsky, I felt more for because at least he has something that he wants to attain, even if he's not doing anything to get it.
Yeah.
At
This guy doesn't
least
really want anything.
George,
Yeah.
yeah, George in this book, um, it's ironic, or it's probably just very on the point that this is George Orwell talking about himself, because the main character is named George.
Mm.
It's yeah, I'm so on the fence about it because I don't think that it's a book that I could recommend to most people,
Okay.
but it's also a book that I think has enough going for it that you can connect with the guy and say, you know what? Like, I see where he's coming from. This feels like more like my father in a way because he
Mm.
comes from like the small town. I even came from a small town a little bit too, like population of 2,500. And I can see. that, but I've never really had the nostalgia to go back. It's more like, well, that place existed. It's probably gotten a little bit better for my hometown. My father's hometown has gotten worse, and maybe he wished that there were like some factories to at least give it life. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's so middling in that way, or not even middling. Middling would be like very little going for it. This one for me, it has pros and cons that kind of balance out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a weird book in a way.
Yeah.
You
Like,
don't know what how to rank it here.
yeah, yeah. So Bulbok, for example, had nothing going for it and was completely middling. This has some things that like make you a bit nostalgic and feel for this guy, but then also makes you just want to get it over with at times too. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to rank it. Can I?
Wow.
So it this is really, really confusing for me.
Can
Um, do I give it a yeah, 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 or down the gutter?
we give it a single yeah, maybe? Let me see if I can
Can we
manage
give
that.
it both?
And then
There we go. There we go. That's exactly what it
just
deserves.
up and down like a yo-yo. Yeah, I mean, I get it actually. The book was groundbreaking for me, and check out we reviewed it in the past on the show.
Okay.
This book taught me empathy because I'm reading it and I'm like this guy these are the things I've been thinking forever,
Hmm.
you know. And he's well, it only taught me empathy because it agreed with exactly what I was already thinking. But it's the first time I encountered that. And it's kind of like, oh, because he just feels like everything is pointless. It's all the same repetitive dirge. I'm trapped. And that's what the coming up for air is. He feels
Yeah.
stifled. He wants to escape from this rubbish bin that is the world. And he wants to climb up and get air, but there isn't any air. And for me, it was this dramatic moment where I was like, you're right. There's no air. I hate everything. Humans are trash.
But
The
he doesn't even
Tories.
believe that. He
No.
doesn't even believe that. He thinks like he even says in this, I like that towns are growing. That is absolutely something that should happen, but it shouldn't over like spill or
Yeah.
overflow, I guess. Like I don't remember exactly his
For me,
wording there, but
one
yeah.
of the saddest things is going back to because I've always looked to the past, you know, and then when you go back and you realize it's not what you thought it was anymore, or you know, maybe like that old friend you haven't seen in
Well,
a long time, and you hang out with him, and it doesn't feel the same, and that's
it's not
sad.
even it's not even like it hasn't it's not the way it used to be in a way. It's that or it's not like lived up to what you remember it. It's that it has changed and it's gone in a way that you don't remember it being like,
Hmm.
and you wish that it hadn't changed at all. But I do think like the pros of it changing outweigh the cons because if it hadn't changed, there would be zero people there. You would
Yeah, it
be
would have been
living,
worse.
yeah, you'd be living in a place with 20 people who are barely surviving,
Yeah.
below poverty line. So it's yeah, I understand where he's coming from, but also what is he doing to try to change it? Like
Oh,
what
of
is he
course,
doing to
nothing. I'm going to ask you a different question. Let's
make
try to
himself
rank it in
happy?
a slightly different way. I
Okay.
offered you a choice of two books. I said, do you want Keep the Aspidistra Flying or Coming Up for Air? So my question now is, do you think you made the right choice?
Well, I didn't really know the stories to either of them at the time. I think I might have just chosen this one because it was a little shorter.
Yeah.
Uh, but I feel like Keep the Ashes Distra Flying, that must be the same type of idea of you've told me the ending
I
of it
told you a little bit
anyway.
about it, yeah.
Yeah,
But it is very
which
similar.
it makes me feel like that person is just as trapped as this person.
But he's a worse person. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right. You did mention a bit of cheating that happened in that one. This one, he's not a bad person. He just doesn't have anyone.
He's a nobody, which is almost scarier, you know?
Yeah, he's a nobody, but he has no friends. He has kids who are there. He has a wife who is always nagging him, and he sees her as like just like the face that you would see in a mirror. She exists. You can't
Hmm.
imagine a life without her, but also probably not huge fan.
But you know, if this was someone I really knew today, I would give him a piece of advice. which is there's two routes you can take. Either you say that the life you have is actually worth something and you just, stop moping around, spend more time with your kids, try to make a connection with your wife, put in the work to turn things around. Or if you
Mm,
feel that that can't be done or isn't worth doing, then, divorce your wife and look for a different route. But you can't just
yeah,
mope around forever, you know?
yeah. I think if I knew this person in real life, I would stop being friends with him. Because he just seems like someone who's so negative and
Yeah,
yeah. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth. Is it a recommendation?
not
Don't
quite, I
know.
guess. Yeah. It's not
Not
1984, right?
no. 1984 you have to read. This one, I think if this I think it really can speak to a lot of people, but only certain people. I don't think the general public will say, "Oh yes, this is what we need more of."
Fair.
So, yeah.
Cool. Fantastic. I read.
I don't regret reading it. I'll say that.
Okay, that's something. That's something.